There's a tension in the air these days, a real feeling like the world's holding its breath, waiting for the next shoe to drop. And Zelensky, that unshakable symbol of defiance, well, he seems to be standing on increasingly shaky ground.
It is intriguing, isn't it, how quickly things can change, perceptions shift. We were so fixated on that one narrative with Zelensky at the center.
Yeah, the comedian turned wartime hero, right? A beacon of hope against impossible odds. Are those odds starting to stack up against him, though, in ways that we hadn't really anticipated?
I think so. Yeah, we're seeing a different picture emerging now, one where Zelensky's facing these internal pressures and a global landscape that seems to be tilting against him.
Okay, so how did we get here?
Well, to really grasp Zelensky's predicament, I think we need to understand the architect behind much of it. Vladimir Putin, for the past 25 years, he's been playing this strategic game shaping global events to align with his vision.
So this isn't just about two countries clashing. This is something bigger, something Putin's been working on for years.
Exactly. Think about it. Putin's been intervening in European elections, funneling money to candidates who support his ideology, weaponizing social media to spread disinformation.
Wow, so he's really playing the long game, not just with military might, but with information and influence.
Yeah, he's playing multiple games on multiple boards simultaneously. But that core objective, I think that remains very consistent, to fracture the existing world order. He wants to see NATO and the EU weakened, democracy discredited, and Russia restored to a position of global dominance.
But wouldn't that require a huge shift in the global balance of power? How is he managing that?
Well, he's been cultivating this network of individuals and groups sympathetic to his cause. Often these people are in positions of power within Western nations. Think about figures like Marine Le Pen in France, or even individuals like Steve Bannon in the U.S., who have openly said they admire Putin's strongman tactics.
So Putin has allies in unexpected places, people who echo his anti-Western sentiments. That's a little unsettling.
It is. It really highlights how deeply Putin's influence has penetrated Western societies. And I think for him, Ukraine represents the ultimate prize. It's a direct challenge to his authority, a symbol of resistance against his goals for expansion.
And Zelensky's the face of that resistance.
Correct, which is why undermining Zelensky has become one of Putin's top priorities.
I see.
And here's where things get even more complex. We have to talk about the Trump administration.
Trump and Putin, that's a relationship that's been raising eyebrows from the very start.
Okay.
But how does it tie into Zelensky's situation?
The Trump administration's actions perhaps inadvertently have played into Putin's hands. Remember those financial transparency laws aimed at exposing Russian oligarchs' hidden wealth and hindering their ability to move money through the U.S. financial system?
Vaguely, yeah. There was a lot of talk about cracking down on Russian money laundering.
Well, one of Trump's early moves was to weaken those very laws. He also relaxed regulations on foreign agents, making it easier for them to operate within the U.S. And he disbanded task forces that were specifically targeting oligarchs, signaling a shift in U.S. policy.
So while the rest of the world was trying to isolate Putin financially, Trump was seemingly opening doors for him and his inner circle. How did that impact Zelensky?
Well, the U.S. was the main backer of Ukraine's resistance, providing weapons, intelligence sharing, and critical aid. But under Trump, that support began to waver. Imagine being on the front lines fighting for your country's survival, and suddenly your most powerful ally starts hedging their bets.
That must have been a crushing blow for Zelensky.
It was, and it was precisely Putin's intention. By weakening U.S. support for Ukraine, he aimed to erode the morale of the army and make them question whether the fight was sustainable. It's a classic psychological tactic.
Weakening their resolve, making them feel abandoned, ultimately pushing them towards surrender. It's a chilling strategy.
It is. And on top of that, Trump has openly expressed a desire to reintegrate Russia into the global community. He's talked about bringing them back into the G7, potentially lifting sanctions imposed by the previous administration.
So on one hand, you have Putin strategically undermining Zelensky, and on the other, you have Trump potentially offering Putin a path back to legitimacy on the world stage. It paints a bleak picture for Zelensky.
It's a complex and precarious situation. And to make matters worse, this isn't just about U.S.-Russia dynamics. Putin's influence has been steadily growing across Europe as well.
Really? How so?
Think about the impact of Brexit. It weakened the European Union and created divisions within Europe itself. Then consider the rise of leaders like Viktor Orban in Hungary, who openly admire Putin's style of governance.
So you're saying that while Zelensky's been focused on the immediate threat from Russia, the ground beneath him has been shifting on a much larger scale.
Exactly. And that brings us to the internal pressures Zelensky's facing within Ukraine itself.
But hold on, I thought he was incredibly popular, a symbol of national unity. Are you saying there's dissent within Ukraine?
There's a growing undercurrent of discontent, particularly from those on the front lines who have a firsthand understanding of the complexities of this conflict.
This is where it gets really interesting. What are their specific criticisms of Zelensky? So we were talking about how Zelensky's facing criticism even within Ukraine from people who understand the situation best. What are they saying?
Well, they're questioning his strategy, expressing concern that he's a little too focused on getting approval from the West and maybe not in tune enough with what's actually happening on the ground. There's a lot of frustration with the lack of progress in negotiations and the dwindling supplies and the feeling that their sacrifices are being overlooked on the world stage.
So it's like he's stuck between a rock and a hard place, trying to maintain that international support while also dealing with this growing dissatisfaction within Ukraine. How is he even navigating that?
It's an incredibly difficult balancing act. He's trying to project this image of strength and unity, but the cracks are definitely starting to show. And that's what Putin wants, right? He wants to sow discord within Ukraine, weaken their resolve, ultimately break their will to resist.
It all sounds so bleak for Zelensky. I mean, is there any hope for him to turn things around?
He's shown incredible resilience so far, defying expectations and rallying international support. But the challenges are huge. He has to find a way to address those concerns of the people who are actually fighting this war, while also maintaining those international alliances that have been so crucial for Ukraine.
Is there anything he can do to regain the upper hand?
He needs to be really careful. Putin's a master strategist who thrives on exploiting weaknesses and capitalizing on mistakes. And remember, Putin's operating within a system where he faces way fewer constraints.
Yeah, he doesn't have to worry about public opinion or elections, so he can take risks that Western leaders can't.
Exactly. He can afford to wait things out, knowing that democracies are often impatient and easily divided. He's counting on the West eventually just losing interest in Ukraine as new crises inevitably emerge.
It's like he's playing chess while the West is playing checkers. A recipe for disaster for someone like Zelensky who needs that sustained support to survive.
It is. And to make matters worse, a new conflict has recently erupted in the Middle East, and that further complicates things for Zelensky.
Are you serious? Another crisis. You've got to be kidding.
I wish I was, but this new conflict has shifted global attention away from Ukraine. Now there's less media coverage, less public outcry, potentially less willingness from those Western powers to provide the support Zelensky needs.
So now the world has two major crises to deal with, and Ukraine's getting pushed aside.
It's a harsh reality, but that's how global politics work. Attention spans are limited resources, our finite priorities can change really quickly. For Zelensky, this means he's competing for attention and resources with another major conflict that's probably closer to the hearts of a lot of Western nations.
And on top of that, the U.S. has just reaffirmed its unwavering support for Israel in this new conflict, which could make things even harder for them when it comes to supporting Ukraine. Could we be looking at a scenario where the U.S. actually have to choose between Israel and Ukraine?
It's a real possibility, and that thought has to be causing a lot of anxiety for Zelensky. This new conflict strains Western resources. They have to supply weapons and aid to multiple places at the same time, which puts Zelensky in a very vulnerable position.
This is just heartbreaking. It's like the world's against him, pushing him further into a corner every day.
He's facing a real uphill battle on so many fronts, but this is where things get really interesting from a psychological warfare standpoint.
Okay, I'm listening.
Putin is a master at manipulating perceptions and using those psychological tactics to undermine his adversaries.
So give me an example. How is he using psychological warfare in this situation? You were saying something about Putin and his psychological warfare tactics.
Oh, yeah. Every move Putin makes, every word he utters is designed to sow doubt among his opponents and make him seem strong and inevitable. He's deliberately prolonging this conflict to wear down the West.
Like he's saying, look how long I can keep this up.
Yeah.
Can't you? It's a war of attrition, not just on the battlefield, but globally.
Exactly. And he's betting that the West, with its short attention span and its aversion to long wars, will eventually tire out and want an easy way out. Meanwhile, he can control the narrative inside Russia, silence any dissent, and present himself as completely in control.
So Zelensky's trying to hold everything together, battling internal problems and fading support internationally, while Putin's just projecting this aura of calm. That's got to be demoralizing for the people on the front lines.
It is, and that's exactly what he wants. He wants to make resistance seem futile, make people question whether it's even worth it.
So Zelensky isn't just fighting a military battle, he's fighting a psychological one too, a battle for hearts and minds.
Exactly, in Ukraine and globally. And this is where Zelensky's own communication skills come and his charisma and his ability to connect with people on an emotional level. That's a powerful weapon.
He's using his platform to counter that narrative of despair that Putin's pushing, offering hope and resilience in the face of overwhelming odds.
And it's worked. At least at first, he's managed to rally international support, get sympathy, and keep Ukraine's struggle in the spotlight. But can he keep that going as the conflict drags on, as the world's attention inevitably shifts to other things, and as Putin continues to consolidate his power?
That's the question that hangs over everything we've discussed today. It's like something out of Shakespeare. A celebrated leader now facing doubt and dwindling hope, while his enemy manipulates everything from the shadows.
And just like in Shakespeare, the ending is uncertain. Zelensky's story is still being written. He might still find a way through this rally his people outmaneuver his enemies, but the challenges he's facing would test anyone.
So what's the takeaway here? What do we make of all of this?
Zelensky's story, I think, is a reminder that in global politics, things can change very fast. Alliances, shift narratives can be manipulated, and the ground can shift under your feet when you least expect it.
It's a warning about how fragile democracy can be when authoritarianism is on the rise, and how important leadership and resilience are, and the power of storytelling in actually shaping history.
And as we watch this all unfold, it reminds us that the world is a complex and often unforgiving place. The battle for freedom and democracy never really ends. It has to be fought over and over again with each generation.
Zelensky's story, as tragic as it seems now, shows how important it is to be aware, to understand what's happening globally, and to recognize that the choices leaders make have a big impact on our lives.
It makes us think about our own role in shaping the future. What can we do to ensure that freedom and democracy and human dignity actually survive in a world where those values are under threat?
It's a lot to think about. But that's what makes this kind of deep dive so interesting. It forces us to confront difficult realities and grapple with complex questions, and ultimately to understand the world better.
As we keep watching this story unfold, one thing's for sure, the stakes are incredibly high. Not just for Zelensky in Ukraine, but for democracy itself.
So we watch and we learn and we hope that even in the darkest times, there's a flicker of hope that can light the way towards a better future.
A future where leaders like Zelensky can inspire and where freedom and self-determination win out against the odds.
Is this a turning point in history? Is Zelensky a symbol of how quickly fortunes can change in a world where alliances shift like sand? And what does all this mean for the future of democracy on the world stage? Subscribe to our podcast, available on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube. We are here to make things clear. New episodes every day.